Jairaj Chandagraj. So this is my presentation for the first reading assignment. So initially we'll go through some basic tools for the analysis that's being done later. So the tools that we're using are correlation functions and response functions. So first we'll see a brief about the correlation functions. So, yeah. So correlation functions. So the dynamic variables of a system are governed by equations of motion that are determined by a Hamiltonian H, and we define a quantum mechanical operator as follows. And we would usually be interested with the frequency domain as well at certain points of time in our analysis. So we will be using these operators in the upcoming sections. So yeah, I won't be covering too much detail on this due to the limited time given. So now we are interested in correlation functions of variables such as position of a particle alpha, or some simple functions such as density. So now both n and x they follow this quantum operators formula. So we also note that they follow Newton's classical equations as well. So we define these two functions c phi I phi j and s phi I phi j. So when t is equal to t dash, they become static correlation functions as follows. So we substitute the previous results, and by performing the Fourier transform on the C function, we get this, which is called as the power spectrum, and similarly for S as well. Yeah, so one assumption we have made here previously is that this Hamiltonian here is time independent. So because of that, uh, we can have our C phi I phi j and S phi I phi j only depend on this on the time difference between t dash and t, and not on t and t dash separately. Yeah. Okay, now we will look at a brief of response functions. So for this, we will take up static susceptibility, which basically relates the change in the average value of the quantum field at some x to the changes in external fields dou het j of x dash. So it's like a magnetic response to the external magnetic field, which is what we're trying to find. So now the this equation frames the response function chi of phi I phi j in such a way that it's valid only for t greater than t dash. So first of all, so this is the change in our quantum field, and this is our susceptibility function, which is also a response function, and this is the change in that external field at x dash. So now we have written it in this manner so that we ensure that the changes are causal. So what we are trying to say is only changes in some past time t dash can affect the value of the function at time t. So if this function was valid for t dash greater than t, it means it would imply that something in the future is influencing something in the past, which is so far not possible. So we introduce this step function to take care of that. So now about this chi and chi double dash, we will visit it later in the form of Fourier transformed equation. So we will consider the response of a single position independent field phi of t to its conjugate external field h of t. So we have this expression, and yeah. So now we are interested in this response function as a function of frequency rather than time. So we would like to do a Fourier transform of this function and then analyze it. So it is useful to introduce the Laplace transform first. So this is the Laplace transform of that function chi tilde of t, and we call it chi of z. So now we know that this function chi double dash phi I of phi I phi j uh, of t is bounded as t tends to infinity, because if it was not bounded, so at any future time, this the disturbance at the time t dash can only create a finite disturbance at time t. So it has to be bounded. So now because t is positive in this integral, we can say chi of z is analytic in the upper half z plane. So the function chi double dash of t comma t dash, which is chi double dash of t minus t dash, is bounded, and so we can define its Fourier transform with respect to a real frequency variable now. So this is the Fourier transform. Now, if chi double dash t approaches a constant as t tends to infinity, then it will have delta function parts, because when you approach a constant, the Fourier transform of a constant function will be a delta function. Also, other arguments tell us that chi double dash of t is equal to minus chi double dash of minus t. So basically, they're saying it's odd. So all these facts imply that uh, chi of z is equal to this. So now the response function chi of omega relating dou phi of omega and dou h of omega can be obtained using the Fourier representation this. Now, so this is for the step function. So from this and the previous equations, we obtain this expression for the change of field with respect to frequency. So we get this with chi of omega equal to limit of chi of omega plus ie, where epsilon tends to 0. So thus the response function is the limit as this chi of z. So the complex number in z, its imaginary part will approach 0. So it approaches the real axis of the function of chi of z. And we know that this real axis is analytic in the upper half plane, like said before. When the frequency of the external perturbation tends to 0, so basically when omega tends to 0, so we must get static susceptibility. So which is what is given in this equation. So now coming to the Fourier transformed equations. So chi of omega is equal to chi dash of omega plus I chi double dash of omega. And we can relate chi dash and chi double dash with this relation, the Kramers-Kronig relation. So it relates the real and imaginary parts of a complex function that's analytic in the upper half plane. So yeah. So now from these equations, so this and this, we can obtain this. So for this presentation, I've skipped most of the math. If it's required later, I will revisit it again due to time limits. And uh, so now the above analysis of the response of a single scalar field applies without change to any general response function, not only magnetic susceptibility. So the Laplace transform of chi tilde of phi I phi j will satisfy this equation, and so we will have a similar equation just like this. So we will have chi phi I phi j of x dash omega is equal to the real part and the imaginary part, which will be chi dash and chi double dash, and uh, finally putting the zero frequency limit for the static susceptibility on this integral will give us this function. So now we are interested in seeing the response function for the for a damped oscillator. So first we see an undamped oscillator and its formulas. So the Hamiltonian for an undamped oscillator is given by this formula, um, and we can calculate their the position and the um, momentum equations from this. So this curly brackets is the Poisson operator. Um, so yeah, the Poisson bracket is an important operation in Hamiltonian mechanics. Um, so it is usually used to work on a canonical coordinate system, which usually consists of position and momentum variables. So yeah, that the Poisson bracket operator is given by this formula. So Yeah, the position and momentum equations. Now that we have this, so we can write a linear equation in terms of C1 and C2. I will come to what C1 and C2 is. So x of t and p of t are assumed to be proportional to e power minus I omega t. And so we will have x of t is equal to C1 e power I omega t and p of t equal to C2 e power minus I omega t. And we can have a linear equation in two variables, and then we can solve the resulting characteristic equation as follows. So this is the equation we need to solve. So we will get two solutions to this equation, and each solution corresponds to the mode of the oscillator. So the first order Poisson bracket relations can be converted into second order differential equations of Newton's second law by using the previous two equations, these two, and we can get the result as d square x by dt square plus omega naught square x is equal to 0. So yeah, okay, we see about the damped oscillator in brief. So these are the equations of motion of the damped oscillator. So the damped oscillator has the same equations of motion as a non-damped oscillator, except that it has an extra term for friction, which is directly proportional to velocity in the opposite direction of movement. This alpha is defined by Stokes law, and uh, so the solutions of this equation are as follows. So and this is the final equation of motion. So if omega naught square is greater than gamma square by 4, so the omega 1 is real, so this term is omega 1. So it will oscillate with frequency omega 1 and reaching time with time constant 2 by gamma. And if it is less than that value, then omega 1 will be imaginary and there will be no oscillatory component. In this case, the oscillator is said to be overdamped, so it will reach equilibrium quickly, but it will oscillate about the equilibrium point as it does so. Um, yeah. So then we come to the response function. So this is the frequency dependent response of x to the external force. So the denominator of the equation is the characteristic equation of this second order differential equation. So this is the characteristic equation by solving this equation. So this is what we see in the denominator of the response function as well. So we can see that there are poles in x of chi of omega at complex mode frequencies of the oscillator. So poles are basically the roots. So this result is quite general. So a static external force F will lead to an equilibrium displacement of x equal to F by k. And this we can see from the zero frequency limit of this equation. So basically when omega tends to 0, this will become the static response function. So when omega tends to 0, this term and this term will cancel out and we will have a positive term m omega naught square. And at high frequency, our response function will be directly proportional to minus 1 by omega square. Yeah. So we can also see that the x double dash of omega is real, so and odd in omega. So basically the imaginary part of a response function, and it has a Lorentzian distribution, and this is the real part of the function of the response function. So this is positive for omega less than omega naught, tending to 1 by k as omega tends to 0, and it's negative for omega greater than omega naught. And it tends to minus 1 by m omega square as omega tends to infinity, just like we discussed, and it's 0 at exactly omega equal to omega naught. So from this we can say that the steady state time dependence of x of t in the presence of a force F, which we can model as f naught cos omega t, is obtained from the real part of this function x of omega f naught e power minus k omega t. So the real part of the function will be this, and yeah, this is the magnitude and the angle of the function. And these are the plots for the real part and the imaginary part of this function. So now about the Langevin theory. So we'll first talk about random forces and thermal equilibrium. So now the erratic motion of Brownian particles is because of collision with molecules in the fluid in which it moves. So this collision allows energy exchanges between the fluid at temperature T and the particle that is in Brownian motion for establishing the thermal equilibrium. So basically, this equilibrium and all these averages of various measurables in the system is maintained through constant collisions in a particular temperature. So to understand how we can have thermal equilibrium in the presence of random forces, we'll see the case where particles diffuse in one dimension. So individual molecules of the fluid will collide with the diffusing particle in a very random fashion and exert force, whose time average is simply the viscous force minus alpha v, which we saw before. So therefore, we can break the force exerted on the particle by the fluid into two parts. So one is the average viscous force minus alpha v, and a random force whose time average will be zero. Okay, so let's assume that this random force is zeta. So the average, first of all, this random force is modeled as a series of random impulses as shown here. So the average of the zeta will be zero as discussed before. If each impulse is considered as an independent random event, we can consider that zeta of t is independent from zeta of t dash. So when you take an average of this ensemble, it will be alpha into delta t minus t dash. So or a into delta t minus t dash, where a is some constant we have to determine. Uh, now, by the central limit theorem, we can say that the probability distribution of this zeta of t will be a Gaussian with a width determined by its variance as shown here. So this random force is a noise source. So it gives rise to erratic or noisy behavior of observable functions. So the power spectrum of this zeta, or basically the Fourier transform of this correlation, will be A, and that is independent of omega in the independent correlation approximation. So noise source with frequency independent power spectrum is called a white noise. Okay, correlation function for diffusion. So now we can take the equation of motion of a Brownian particle inside a fluid like we discussed before. So basically this is the momentum, this is the drag force, and this is the random force. So the solution to this equation for V of t has a homogeneous part that's determined by the initial conditions, and an inhomogeneous part that is proportional to this zeta function. Since the homogeneous part, which depends on initial conditions, will decay to zero in the time of order gamma power minus 1, the long-term properties of V of t will be determined entirely by the inhomogeneous part, and it will be independent of all the initial conditions. So in Fourier space, so basically in the frequency domain, the inhomogeneous part of V is simply this equation. So using some previous results, we can calculate this correlation function CVV of omega by averaging the product V of omega into V of minus omega over all the random forces. So this is the result we get, and as we saw before, I of omega is A. So this is what we finally get. Um, so now using this equation, we can calculate the instantaneous mean square velocity in terms of A, and hence determine the value of A needed to ensure the thermal equilibrium. Yeah, so we do this, and we get this result. So in thermal equilibrium, we know that this V square is equal to T by M, and so we can conclude that this A is equal to 2 alpha T, which is in turn equal to 2m gamma t, and the correlation of this zeta function will be 2 alpha t into delta of t minus t dash. We're just substituting the value of A here. So the amplitude of white noise fluctuation is fixed by the requirements of the thermal equilibrium. So now the correlation function CVV of omega determines CVV of t comma t dash as the V average of V of t into V of t dash, as well as the instantaneous average mod of V square. So this is the instantaneous average. So if we neglect the homogeneous term in the solution for V of omega, uh, uh, which is valid for only times that are long compared to 1 by gamma. So the Fourier transform of this equation here will give us the function CVV of t, which is basically limit of t tends to infinity CVV of tau plus t comma tau. So calculating that, we get this, which basically gives us the velocity correlation to be a exponential distribution. So it shows an exponential decay to 0. So we see that after t greater than 1 by gamma, this value becomes very low. So it shows that the velocities are becoming uncorrelated after the time 1 by gamma. So now the Fourier transform x omega of position is v of omega by minus I omega, like we saw in previous results. So this is the position correlation function. Uh, so the integral of this function over omega will give us the mean square displacement. So the integral is divergent because of this extra factor of omega square in this denominator. Um, and we correctly conclude that the mean square displacement value will be infinite. So the average of x of t minus x of t dash, the whole square, however, is finite. So using this equation, we can conclude with this. And the second term of the in this expression is easily evaluated by contour integration. The first term, which is directly proportional to mod t, can be obtained from the second by taking limits. So gamma tends to 0. Thus, if we make all those approximations and integrate, we will get this formula for mean square displacement. So for very small times, we can say that this mean square displacement value is basically v into t the whole square. We can create an analogy of such sort, and we can say it's uh, velocity correlation square into t square. So now calculating this value in terms of this velocity correlation function, we get this result, this integration. Uh, so from this, we can easily calculate a time dependent diffusion constant. So we know that we just have to find the slope of this mean square displacement for the diffusion constant, because as we saw in the class before, the mean square displacement is a linear function with slope 2 kd, where k is the number of dimensions. So yeah, so this approaches the diffusion constant as shown here. So this last expression could have been obtained directly from the previous equations, that is uh, these equations, and we could have got the d is equal to t by m gamma. Okay, so now if we have v of 0 is equal to v naught, so we'll have v of t is equal to this, and the average of this function will just be v naught e power minus gamma t, because average due to all random forces will random force influences will cancel out. So this is the velocity correlation function. Um, and now the displacement of the particle can be obtained from velocity by simple integration. So x naught is basically its position at time t equal to 0. So we can calculate the displacement as a function of time. Um, so similarly, we can calculate correlations in the displacement at different times t and uh, t dash, where both t and t dash are greater than 0. Sorry. Yeah. So using the equation we saw here for velocity correlation, we can substitute our result in this equation, and we can find the mean square displacement to be this expression 2t by gamma m into the time difference minus 1 by gamma into 1 minus e power minus gamma t minus t dash plus this term v naught square minus t by m into 1 by gamma square into e power minus gamma t dash minus e power minus gamma t the whole square. So now if both t and t dash are much greater than minus gamma power minus 1, this will reduce to uh, this equation here.
So we will get this as the result. Yeah. So basically it's independent of B naught if you notice. So now uh, if t and t dash both are much less than gamma phi minus 1, then this mean square displacement will be equal to v naught square into t minus t dash the whole square. So that means the Brownian particle moves ballistically with the specified initial velocity. So basically, it's going by uh, like like v into t basically. So the average of this equation over an equilibrium ensemble of initial velocities also reduces to this equation. Just 1 second, I'll go back again. Yeah, this equation. And the average is obtained from this equation uh, by setting t dash equal to 0 so that x of t dash is equal to x naught. So the variance in position can be calculated as the root mean square mean square displacement, and we can simply use the formula from what we got before. And note that the variance of the position is not equal to delta x of t the whole square. So that is this. So it is not equal to this value because it explicitly retains the memory that initial motion was ballistic rather than diffusive. So basically it is only the influence of the velocity and not the influence of the other forces. So the variance of x of t minus x of t dash minus the average of x of t minus x of t dash the whole square does not, and is in fact is identical to this. The noise zeta is a Gaussian random variable. Both v of t and x of t are linear functions of zeta. Yeah, so that's about short time behavior of this system. So now the fluctuation dissipation theorem for the harmonic oscillator. So a harmonic oscillator in a viscous fluid, like a free particle in the same fluid, will reach thermal equilibrium as a result of collisions with the fluid molecules. This means that the average energy per degree of freedom of the oscillator will be T by 2, or that the mean square displacement x square of T is equal to T by m omega naught square, and V square of T is T by m. So the equation of motion for an oscillator in a random force will be the equation that we saw before, except that we'll replace small f with zeta of t. In the long time limit, we only have to concern ourselves with the inhomogeneous solution in this equation, which is a function of frequency. So basically this. So this is the response function. The nature of this random force does not depend on whether our particle is attached to a spring or not. The noise correlation function C zeta zeta of omega, hence independent of omega naught, and has the same form as for omega naught of 0 if omega naught was 0. So from this, the correlation function for the and the correlation function for zeta of t, we can obtain the correlation function of xx of omega. So yeah, and using the previous equations and the fact that the average displacement of a particle in oscillation is 0, so we can say that Cxx of omega is equal to Sxx of omega, and we obtain this result where beta is 1 by t. So this is the fluctuation dissipation theorem. It relates this the imaginary part of our response function, what we saw previously, and it says it's proportional to the rate at which work is done by the external forces, basically the frictional forces that's dissipated as heat. So thus absorption or response experiments that probe this function contain the same information as scattering or related measurements that probe the S function because of this. So although we derive the fluctuation dissipation theorem for a single classical oscillator in viscous fluid, this theorem will apply to all response and correlation functions of any system in equilibrium. Okay, now we'll talk about the Fokker-Planck equation in brief. So in the previous discussion, we focused on correlation functions of velocity and positions only. So the Langevin equations can be used to derive these correlation functions of velocity and position, and also we can derive equations that determine the probability distribution function for all these variables. So basically the probability of finding a particle in space or finding the velocity distribution and so on. So the equation for velocity probability function for a diffusing particle is called Fokker-Planck equation. Its generalization to displacement and other variables is called the Smoluchowski equation. So these equations will show how probability distributions decay to Maxwell-Boltzmann distributions, describing thermal equilibrium at after like infinite time, what we usually assume. These are applicable not only for harmonic Hamiltonians, but also anharmonic Hamiltonians containing other than quadratic terms in the fundamental variables like we saw before. Um, so first we'll begin the derivation of our Fokker-Planck equation by rewriting the equation of motion in terms of momentum p, which will help us generalize to other variables. So dp by dt is equal to minus gamma p plus zeta, the random force. So which is equal to minus capital gamma dou h by dou p into zeta. So this capital gamma is what we saw as alpha, which is small gamma m, and the correlation of the random force zeta is equal to 2 capital gamma t delta t minus t dash. This is from the previous results that we saw. The equation is now in the form that could in general include any kind of functions in the Hamiltonian hedge. So now we will consider the probability of the particle having a momentum p comma t, the particle having a momentum p at time t, given it had momentum p at p naught at time t naught. So the probability that the particle has momentum p at time t plus delta t is given here. So the conditional probability uh, of this. So basically, we are reducing our sample space for the probability. So we know that the particle had momentum p dash at time t. So if the particle had momentum p dash at time t, then what is the probability that it would have momentum p at time t plus delta t? So that's the average of p minus p of t plus delta t given p dash of given p dash and t. So we can calculate this from the motions of equation that we saw before here and substitute it in this integration variable. And yeah, so the average of this third term here, so this random force term will anyway average to 0. However, note that its square will be proportional to delta t. So basically we have so integral of the average of the zeta function correlation between t1 and t2. So that is angle bracket zeta t1 into angle bracket zeta t2. If we integrate it over both t1 and t2, we will get 2 gamma capital T delta t. So terms higher order in zeta t of delta t are higher order in delta t because zeta is a gamma random variable, and averages of products of zeta can be expressed as a product of the variance. So basically, when you multiply the zeta more than 2 times as well. So for example, if you have some function, some observable that depends on zeta cube, say, so that will depend on higher powers of delta t. So yeah, for a simple example, say take integral gamma t whole power 4. So instead of the just a linear, make this power 4. So that will approximately be proportional to delta t the whole square. So using this result, we can now expand the equation shown here, and we will get this. So then this result will allow us to calculate dou p by dou t as shown here. So the left hand side of the equation will be 0 when p reaches its equilibrium form, that is predicted by Maxwell-Boltzmann statistics. So basically the probabilities will decay to a equilibrium probability state which will not change in the future. So when the system has attained equilibrium, it will tend to stay in that equilibrium. So the probability distribution for any variable phi satisfying a linear differential equation of this form, so what we saw here, will satisfy this equation for, so the probability distribution of that function phi will satisfy this equation. So this general equation with this small p replaced by any observable x will basically become the Smochowski equation. So we can easily verify that the probability that we attain here, so this equation will satisfy the Fokker-Planck equation that we discussed. Yeah, so this is the end of the reading assignment material. Thank you.